everyone, welcome back. Today we are talking about something that separates professional data solutions from hobby projects. So, deployment pipelines in Microsoft Fabric. If you ever build something amazing in development and then wondered, now how do I get this to production safely? So, this video is for you. Let's dive in. Imagine you are a software developer who just wrote some brilliant code in your laptop. It works perfectly, but now you need to get it running in production where thousands of users will depend on it. You would not just copy paste it directly to production, right? That would be chaos. You would test it fast, maybe have someone review it, make sure it does not break anything. The same principle applies to data solutions. You build lakehouses, warehouses, data flows, and reports in a development environment. But before your business users start relying on them, you need to test everything, get approval, and deploy systematically. That exactly what deployment pipelines actually solve. So deployment pipelines in Fabric are your automated highway from development to production. Think of them as a structured pathway with checkpoints. You build in development, test in a testing environment, and then finally release to production. Each stage is isolated and controlled. The beauty is that Fabric manages this entire process for you. You are not manually copying items between workspaces. You are not worrying about missing dependencies or forgetting to update something. The pipeline handles all it systematically. So most deployment pipeline follows a three-stage models: development, test, and production. So let's get some idea how actually these are working. Development is kind of your playground. It's where you experiment, build, iterate, and break things without consequences. You creating a lakehouse, building data flows, designing reports. It can be messy, it can be created, when all perfectly fine. Then you can think of for the test stage, which is kind of a safety net. This is where your creation get validated. Does the data flow work with the realistic data volumes? Does the report perform well? Are there any errors? Test it with your catch problems before they reach users. And finally, it's a production, which is a real deal. So, this is where business users access your solutions. Everything here needs to work flawlessly because it directly impacts the business. Changes should not happen here randomly. They should arrive through the pipeline, tested, and approved. Now, here is how Fabric implemented this. Each stage in your pipeline corresponds to a workspace. So, you would have a development workspace, a test workspace, and a production workspace. These are physically separate environment, which is crucial for isolations. And when you assign a workspace to a pipeline stage, you essentially saying the workspace represents this stage of my deployment process. All the items in that workspace are now part of that stage and can be managed through the pipeline. Now, let's talk about how deployment actually works. Imagine you built a lakehouse in your development workspace, populated with the sample data, and verified it works. Now you have to move it to test. In the pipeline interface, you will see your development stage with the lakehouse listed. between development and test, there might be an indicator showing they are out of sync, maybe an orange X. In our lab scenario, we'll get that one. This tells you there are differences between the stages. And when you click deploy, Fabric copies the lakehouse and all its dependencies from the development to test. The lakehouse appears in your test workspace, configured exactly like it was in the development environment. You have not manually creating anything. So pipeline actually deploying in this case. So pipeline constantly tracks synchronization between the stages, and when all stages are in sync, you will see green check marks between them. This means development, test, and production all have the same version of everything. So now let's go through the lab uh, for better understanding on this. In pipe housing, Microsoft Fabric. So here I have already connected to Microsoft Fabric. So deployment pipelines in Microsoft Fabric allow you to automate the process of copying changes made to the content in Fabric items between environments, like development environment, test environment, and production environment. So we can use deployment pipelines to develop and test content before it reaches to end users. So in this exercise, we'll create a deployment pipeline, assign different stages like development, test, and production. Then we create some content in a development workspace and use deployment pipelines to deploy it between the like development, test, and production pipeline stages. So let's start that one now. So very first thing, we need to create a workspace. So here click on my workspace. You can just click new item, or you can go back here, you can click on create, and then here you can also select what you have to do. But here I'm going to workspace button, then click new workspace and give a workspace name. For the first one, we are going to give it that workspace name is development. And under advanced, make sure that fabric capacity is enabled. Development 03. Click on apply. Now let's create two more workspace. One is test and another one is production. Test 03. Not available. Click apply. Then create another workspace, which is production 03A. Advanced fabric capacity, click on apply. Now if we go to workspace development, I'd like to see that change the naming convention on where I'm going. Production. Oh no, I don't want to go to production. That 03A development. Development 3. Workspace settings. I'm just going to make it consistent. Is that allowed to do that one? So it's considered that value, so that's good. Now we are going to create a deployment pipeline. So from here, let's go to this first on this workspace, like development here. So select this workspace, and we have selected this development one, and select the deployment pipeline. Then from here, select the new pipeline. You see that, select that new pipeline, and here give a unique name. So let's give that data fabric uh, pipeline 03A. You can give some description, but that is optional. Click next. Now here we can see that there are three phases, like development, test, and production. Now here for development, select this check mark that will assign the uh, development for this development stage. Now inside test, select the test and check mark, so it will be assigned for here, and also same for production. So we assign like these three for each deployment stages. Now let's create a content. So select here the workspace, like development one. So here this is the development workspace. Select that one, and your changes will not be saved. Do you want to continue? I save that one, isn't that? Let me check why I'm getting this message. This is tick development. Yes, now it's there. So now here I'm going to create a new item. Select new item and look for lake house. Click lake house. So let's give a name, lab lake house, and select create. So it's loading my lake house. Now when you say that get data into your lake house, let's select start with sample data, and there are different options like different data, sample data there. For this one we are going to select the New York City taxi. So data has been loaded, and we can see the data this side. Now if we go back to pipeline that we created, and here you can see that the development stage, then there is a test stage and production stage. And if you look here that development stage, let me drag a little up, you can see that this canvas lake house you created as a stage item, we can see that one. But if you check into test, and there is a red circle which indicate that development and test stages are not synchronized. And you can get like if you see that there's a new deployment pipelines, you can also see the old like previous one, just select there, then you can see that one like these three phases. If I say inside the pipeline, there's a deployment, test and production. So now um, to progress that one, you see that there is a deploy option. So let's select that deploy. And if you see the options here, next stage, which is ultimately you are about to deploy from development to test. Okay, so it's going to deploy this lake house. And if you see here, there is optional like you can put some note why you want to do that on, like justifications, then click on deploy. If we deploy, then you see that copying the content to this workspace. So that means it's going from here to there. Here is the lake house. So it's successfully completed into test environment. So if you see here, you can see that it has been copied. But if I go there, it's not there yet. So now I can deploy that from like next phases that can be production. So I can, if I select deploy, then it's coming the information test to production. And what it is going to do, going to progress this lake house to production environment. And you can add your node and then click on deploy. So you can see the deployment is in progress and copying the content to this workspace from this test to production environment. So now you see that that's comparing and they are all in sync. So that was actually our lesson for this lab. You can see the successful deployment and they are all completed. So uh, we first test into development environment. When we are happy, we progress that to test environment, and then when that all good into test environment, we then copy it to the production environment. So we have created a pipeline and then assigned stages to this pipeline. So that's all for this lab. See you in next lab.